We are turning into Ballsy by nature. Ballsy by nature is because we're going to educate all of our buyers as to the bars and the products that they have on their shelf are not as healthy as what they think they are. And we're going to call out the back of the packs and start to speak with our buyers and saying, do you think this is natural? Do you think this word is healthy? Do you think that this should be given to children and sold? We're super excited because we're rebranding with a wonderful company called Robot Foods based in Leeds. We're going to start again with a really dynamic, bold, beautiful brand that's completely clean, and we're going to take over the shelves and speak to all the buyers and re-educate them.
Welcome to Chain Reaction, the video podcast for the supply chain and logistics industry. In this podcast, we speak to industry leaders who share their ideas, thoughts and anecdotes from within the logistics world.
Hello everybody, welcome to another episode of Chain Reaction podcast. Today I have Matt Hunt as our guest today. He is a serious entrepreneur and the founder of his latest business is the protein ball company. And but this, I believe you have been working in that space for quite some time. So could you tell us a little bit about your journey?
Yeah, hi Michael. Nice to be on the podcast. Thank you for inviting me. It's been quite a journey. I will whiz through a little bit about me so that listeners can understand where I'm coming from. With this accent, I'm from Romford, and I grew up pretty much on Romford Market, selling fruit nuts on a market stall. I then did an apprenticeship at Ford's, but really thought that I wanted to get into food. And so that's where we started running our first food businesses. And we wanted to move, my wife and I, Hayley, we really wanted to get into fast moving consumer goods. And so we started our very first brand, which was Oloves, which was a healthy olive snack. We were the very first in the market. And we've sold about 70 million bags of Oloves since we started all around the world. And then from Oloves, we've gone on to the Great British Porridge Company and the Protein Ball Company, which we can come into.
No, very interesting. We did talk about it earlier. You also have been on Dragon's Den. So can I tell us something about that? Because that's quite exciting.
Dragon's Den. That was some experience. You have to pass an exam kind of leading up to it. You go there and they make sure that you're okay in front of a camera and that you've got a really good story. So I was with my business partner on the Great British Porridge Company called Jacqueline Barleycorn. And it was a really difficult kind of moment because you had to try and memorize all of the figures and the dragons are going to put you down and hit you quite hard. But we decided that we wanted to go in and we wanted singing bears and music. So we went to a shop and we hired these bear costumes. And we went on to the show and we just had a blast. We had the music pumping. We had the bears dancing around and the 5 dragons looked a bit startled. But they tried the porridge and Michael, they really enjoyed the porridge. It was a real hit. We had five yeses, which is known as a full house, which doesn't happen very much. And so it was great for the brand, but it was pretty good for us because it gave us sort of self-confidence. It took us completely out of our comfort zone. And I just think it was a really good experience to look back on something that you've done.
Oh, very interesting. I mean, especially with just wanted to ask the person who's done it kind of firsthand is how much of that is for the show and how much of that is actually for real. As in, I'm not saying that they're not making investment decisions there. What I'm saying is that how much of that is theatrics there on the day during shooting and how much of that is actually pragmatic, down to business. Well, let's actually make this work.
Oh, I'd say it's 90%. A show, and it's pretty much just for the public to enjoy. The 10% about the business and the questions, they're just kind of analysing your business to see if they could invest in it and if it will make them money. But what people don't realise is that once you walk through the lift, which isn't a lift, it doesn't move. But once you're actually in the den with the dragons, you're in there for about 2 hours, and they managed to condense that down to about 3 or 4 minutes. So they really put you under pressure and ask you lots of harsh questions. But I'd say 90% of it is for the show. It's for the public.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, no, it's fascinating. The show definitely is very interesting and very entertaining to watch.
Super interesting.
And I just, yeah, I quite often was thinking for myself, like, would I be able to go through that? I'm not sure. Um, FMCG business in general is actually quite a tough space, and so if we talk maybe a little bit about the protein ball company and what you do today, kind of how you position, how you work, because that is a sort of, especially with kind of the healthy snack, healthy food, healthy ingredients business, is quite a tough, quite a competitive space. There's lots of younger and more established businesses. So how do you find kind of your space there?
Yeah, you're right. It's super competitive. We've been in the space for just over 10 years. That's when we started the protein ball company, and we set up factory from day one on a shoestring and got some small family and friend investors. And yeah, in 10 years, we've seen the market has really changed because we were one of the first to have a protein ball that was completely natural and didn't have all of the additives and all of the emulsifiers and sugars and the sweeteners and everything. But we've seen over the last 10 years that, as you say, the market has completely changed. You have a lot of big players that kind of manage to hold on to the shelf space, and it's really hard for you to approach a supermarket and to get listing. And then there's also like a heap of challenger brands that are launching sort of almost weekly at the moment that are trying to take a bite of the bigger market share as well. But over 10 years, I must say that we've held ourselves. We've obviously gone through Brexit and then COVID and then inflation and then the European wars and all the price increases. And over 10 years, we've still managed to stay strong.
Mm.
We've got different parts of the business. We also have private label as well. So that's what's kept us going during some of the darker days during COVID. But you're right, it's super competitive. And I think the way to kind of gain your ground is to have something that's unique and something that you're passionate about and something that's really great for the customers and for your customers to get on board and be part of your journey. And that's what's going to keep you ahead of the competitors.
Mm. No, it's very interesting, and I know that sort of I buy some healthy snacks as well. As you absolutely any user is absolutely spoiled for choice, whether it's on the shelf in the supermarket or whether it's in the likes of Amazon. So I wanted to explore a little bit. So this being a kind of a supply chain related, supply chain focused channel,
Yes.
and a podcast. I'd like to ask you a little bit more about the operational side of things, because obviously, all of those marketing claims about being whether it's organic, whether it's kind of various nutritional contents, and you alluded to like emulsifiers and other things, they actually need to be backed up by the actual kind of the actual operational setup, your production setup, your sourcing. So let's talk about the two areas. One is the kind of inbound produce and how it comes in, how you handle that, and then when you have finished goods, and then we'll talk a bit later about kind of the channels that you work with, as it's B2C, B2B. So on the kind of on the ingredient side, so I'm sure you guys have a quite a diverse supply base that you come in. But what are the kind of the supply chain logistics related kind of either challenges that you're facing and how you overcome them that will make you kind of connected with connected product, kind of the visibility of the manufacturing all the way from source to the bag, so you can
Yeah.
firm the you deliver the customer
You're right.
experiences.
There's a lot of legislation and there's a lot of accreditation and certification that's needed. We are a BRC AA-grade factory, which means that once a year that we will have the BRC accreditors will come into our factory. We'll check that everything's in place, but a big part of that is sourcing and to make sure, as you say, the claims on the back of your pack are correct. So we will work with, I think we've probably got, say, 50 suppliers on the books at the moment. And there's probably about 25 suppliers that are monthly that we're purchasing from. And we have to make sure that each supplier has got the right accreditation, whether that's IFS, whether that's BRC, or whether that's their local kind
Mm,
of accreditation for health and for their local governments. And we work with kind of fairly big companies so that we have really good we understand the logistics of when the goods are coming in, that we can clear them in customs. And to clear them in customs, then we need to have all the certification as well from the customer and from us and our company details. And sometimes if it's coming from, say, India with peanuts or from peanut butter, or we have dates coming in from Dubai, then we might need a custom broker that will help us to clear some of the goods, because sometimes some of the specialized paperwork gets a little bit intense. And if we're only buying small amounts, we may use a broker which is in the middle, usually based in Europe, maybe Valencia, or based in the UK, and we will clear the goods using a broker and buy smaller amounts so that we can buy sort of pallet drops as opposed to containers. So
Right.
it's really important that we look at across the whole supply chain and we analyze every single part. And we have, as a company that's BRC AA, we have a questionnaire, an audit that the companies will have to fill in to make sure that everything's 100%. And once we're happy, then we can sign that supplier on and we can start to deal with them.
Yeah, I had a recent podcast with the with the CTO of a company that does AI enabled kind of this customs clearance documentation, and we talked about that quite. It was a quite interesting discussion. Well, we talked about AI in supply chain in general, but that was the particular application that they were using, and he just talked at length about how complex and how tedious the whole process is of just filling up the customs documentation with all the certificates and
Yeah,
making sure that it's like it's all lines and everything is matched and nothing is omitted and everything's included. And
yeah.
it's quite a bit of work. And I can imagine that Brexit has not been kind of very helpful in that space. So you just even importing from Europe is
It's
still creates quite a lot of paperwork and pain.
Yeah, absolutely. So we do have a lot of ingredients that will come in from Europe,
Mm,
and we do struggle to get them through. And we find that some countries are kind of a little bit easier than others. So when we import from Germany, from Holland, it can be quite seamless. When we start looking at Eastern Europe, it can become more difficult. And when we look at
right.
Southern Europe, it can sometimes become almost nigh on impossible. When you're looking
Okay.
to bring in goods from maybe even France, from Spain, from Portugal, that can be a
Mm.
real challenge. Even Greece, it's super challenging. So depending on the country, depends on the paperwork, and then depends on the custom broker and how you clear the goods. But you're right, there can be a lot of challenges when you're actually moving goods
Mm.
around and bringing goods in.
Okay. Well, now talking about the kind of the finished goods, and we did touch upon kind of a couple of different channels that you operate with. So I can imagine that you go to B2C using various kind of online platforms like Amazon's and Shopify's, as
Yes,
well as you did mention that you are on retail shelves, and you mentioned private labels as well. So
yes,
could you just elaborate a little bit more about that kind of in a business and maybe some
yeah.
particular challenges that are associated with that?
Absolutely. So we went on to Amazon only a couple of years ago. We were quite late to the party,
Mm.
Amazon UK, and we've seen quite a lot of growth over the last 12 months. We've doubled in business, and we're really behind it. But with Amazon, obviously, there's a lot of additional costs. So your profits are always going to be fairly low. And even when you scale
Mm.
up, the profit margin still doesn't move to much more than what it started at. But we've seen our Amazon business, we would hope to be around about the £400,000 mark this year, just on
Right.
Amazon.co.uk alone. And we're just starting Amazon Germany and setting up the paperwork for that now. Our B2C business, as you said, is through Shopify, and a lot of people use Shopify. It's a common template. It's very easy to kind of drag and drop all of your branding onto the website. And that business alone, I think this year should be around 400,000 alone, as well as. So we're seeing a lot of increase. We're bringing on more and more customers. Our retention is really
Mm.
good. Sometimes the cost of acquisition of a customer is increasing because we're in the protein space and there's a lot of big players. And to get anything with the word protein in is quite expensive. But we're starting with subscriptions, and we can really see that our Shopify is beginning to grow. So we're really happy with that. But also we do have retail. We're in supermarkets like Morrison's. We do really well in food service, like cafes, like Black Sheep Cafe. And actually, we've just signed a brand new UK cafe chain, which is 600 stores, which we're not allowed to say the name until next month. But we will see the two protein ball flavors, lemon pistachio and blueberry oat muffin, in 600 coffee shops from next month, which we're super excited about. Great for exposure and a really wonderful coffee store to be in. So yeah, we kind of have multi-prong, and then we also have private label. And private label for us means that a customer will come to us, a sports or nutrition or maybe a big supermarket.
Yeah.
We will make a product for them and develop the recipe, and then their brand will go on the packaging. And we have seen that business absolutely explode, especially in the USA. We deal with a company called Whole Foods Market, which is probably the leader, not necessarily the biggest, but the
Right.
leader in kind of health, nutrition, and in really great brands. And we've been working with them on recipes, and we have seen an explosion over the last 4 years. And because of the success of Whole Foods, we've managed to leverage and to pivot into different supermarket chains as well. So we now have 4 supermarket chains across the USA, which is the equivalent of 10,000 stores, which is the equivalent of around about 4 or 5 containers per month leaving our factory in Worthing and sailing over to the USA.
That's quite an exposure. I was actually thinking about sort of operationally, do you have a production there, or the production is here? You say as you said that you're shipping a
Yes,
couple of container loads a month,
4 or 5 containers at the moment
4 or 5
heading over
containers.
to the
Yeah, okay.
USA, and that's just about to increase.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So I'm sure that as the business will grow, you will start thinking about maybe opening even a production there because, yeah, shipping out of UK over the pond might not be
No,
the most optimal logistics solution.
that's right, Michael. And we have looked at it, and we've looked at 2 different areas. And I think once we have a bit more stability with what's happening in the world, there is a potential for us to open up over there because we definitely have the demand, and we know that we can supply, and we have the production knowledge. So I think it would be really great at some point to look at the US market. But we're
Yeah.
also growing across Europe as well, and Germany is our second biggest market, and that's growing month on month at the moment.
You are listening to Chain Reaction. This podcast is brought to you by Phlox, the leading marketplace for the supply chain and logistics industry. Visit phlox.is to find out how you find the perfect supplier or make your services available to prospective buyers. Thanks for tuning in. Now back to the show.
No, that's very interesting. I think that brings me to the next level of the complexity that you guys are dealing with, both on the inbound ingredient side, because you said that you had dozens of suppliers, and I'm sure you have 100 different products, hundreds of different products, grades, qualities, batch sizes, and all of that. So that's coming in, as well as that a lot of finished goods, different SKUs for different markets, for different channels. That
Yes.
actually quite a bit of complexity. It's quite a bit of complexity. So how do you guys manage that in a sense, from a point of view of how does technology help you with that?
Great question.
What kind of tech you have, and
Yeah.
how because I know Excel spreadsheets are no longer cutting it, I'm sure.
Yeah, no, absolutely not. So we started early doors with a program called Unleashed, and Unleashed.
Right. Okay.
I don't know if you've heard of that, but that's
I've heard of it. Yes. Yeah.
yeah, that's fantastic because that will have all of our ingredients and our suppliers and our pricings, and it will show us when we're low on ingredients, and then we can forecast what the production schedule looks like for the next few months, and that will tell us what we need to order in order to be able to fulfill the production. So Unleashed has been a fantastic program for us.
Mm,
That also will marry up with Xero. I know it marries up with QuickBooks and others, so that you can
yeah.
have your accounts linked to your supply chain program, so you can get a kind of a snapshot or a picture of where you are each day, which money is needed to come in and customers owe you money, which money you need to pay out through Xero,
Mm,
and then a balance of what ingredients, what bags, what boxes, what ingredients you need for the next few months. So you're right, technology plays a huge part in this. We also have a CRM called Prospects, which also plugs into Unleashed, and that can
yeah.
keep tabs on all of our customers when we expect them to
Mm.
order, and all of our notes as well. So technology does play a huge part in the growth of the business because, as you said, if we were just on spreadsheets, I think we would probably be in quite a big mess for the amount of customers and finished goods that we have.
Mm. Right. No, it's very interesting. I actually have another client that we are currently onboarding with that uses Unleashed. So
Okay,
my understanding is the way they use it is almost like an ERP system. It's like an ERP slash inventory management system. So you know
exactly.
exactly what's in, what's out, where it needs to be from the kind of the traceability and trackability point of view. And the
Yes.
reason why we are onboarding them as a client, because we are now then serve as intermediary with the logistics service providers to
Uh,
make sure that that information that comes out of Unleashed goes into the logistics service provider in exactly the way that they need to then execute which orders, which shipment, how it needs to be packed, where it needs to go,
Yeah.
in kind of in by what the ETAs and managing the financial side of the logistics business. So this is the connectivity, and I 100% agree with you. And that's the reason why we're doing that as Flocks. Is like we cannot. There's no way a business of that scale and that complexity can be managed with emails and Excel spreadsheets.
No, absolutely. And it's closing the loop as well. If you have all of the information, it means that when you're delivering to the customer, they have all of the correct paperwork that accompanies the logistics of it all. So yeah, it's fantastic. And I thought, we've worked with Unleashed now for about 8 years, and that works really well for us.
Okay. No, that's yeah. Sorry. This is very interesting, and the one of the things that actually I touched on when we talk about logistics, and we talk about I mentioned earlier kind of I would call not an issue, but the notion of trust that is happening with logistics service providers. And what I mean by trust is the relationships with the logistics service providers, where the businesses of smaller to medium sizes sometimes may feel kind of overlooked, underappreciated, sometimes being treated, I wouldn't call it as a second-class citizens, but could be deprioritized in favor of much larger FMCG businesses. So I wonder whether you've seen anything like that in relation to your business. Plus, whether you've seen, I even heard the term bullied by like a larger retailers into like, well, do this, don't do that, and stop that. And they don't care about how much it actually costs you to satisfy their whims and desires. So maybe can you elaborate on that experience and your thoughts on this?
So as you deal with big supermarkets and bigger companies, and you're small, the demands are pretty excessive, and bullying is kind of a term where a big company can dictate what a small company does when they deliver. And we've also had it before where we've made, say, 100,000 bags for a big airline, and then they've cancelled the order. And then we've gone back and said, like, we received a legal document from you which had the purchase order on. And they've said, well, part of read the legals then, because it says we can cancel at any point. So you quite often will find that big companies will treat smaller companies pretty harshly. And being a founder of a small company, you can really struggle because some of these decisions that the big companies make, they can make and break you as a business. Whether they take an order, don't take an order, delay an order, especially if you've purchased all of the materials needed, the bags, the boxes, the ingredients, you've got your staff ready to start, say, a night shift, and then all of a sudden an email comes through, we're going to delay the containers by 2 more months. So yeah, it can become really challenging. And I think you are always under a bigger company, and people always say, well, negotiate with them. There actually is not much negotiation you can do with multi-billion dollar pound companies. You have to almost take what they say and try and deliver to the best of your ability, and that's what we always do. But usually we find the logistics companies are on our side, and they will help us to try and hit time slots, and they will help us to try and deliver goods intact on time. So it's usually our challenge is more that the bigger companies, because basically you don't really have a relationship anymore. You may have had a relationship when we started the business 10, 15 years ago, but now you're kind of whoever is your contact. You may have had 4 or 5 contacts in the last year because people are either moving around on maternity or they're kind of by default, they're being told to move to another section so that no relationship can be built. And I think that's where the difficulty is. I might phone and say, John, we're going to be a day late, and John's left, and now I've got to try and find somebody else to explain that we're going to be a day late.
Right.
So, yeah, it does become harder, and the smaller you are, you 100% understand the law of the jungle and where you stand in the relationship.
And it's getting kind of transactional. No, I completely understand with you. I agree with you. And it gets sort of on one hand, there are people doing business with people, but on the other hand, especially in the modern days and with the adoption of the cloud-based technologies and various kind of network solutions and marketplaces,
Yeah.
people is becoming transactional. You don't even know who's on the other end. You
No,
just somebody pressed the button and you got a signal and you just fulfill, and then through the system you just say, well, I'm going to be a day late, and in the hope that somebody's going to listen on the other end.
that's right. Yeah.
That becomes a challenge. But that's an interesting point on the other side of things. So how do you grow in this kind of environment? If you, because you said that you don't build relationship with your buyers. So who would you build relationship with? How would
So
you grow? How do you reach out?
our relationships with our staff for retention and to make sure
Yeah,
that everyone's happy in the business. And I think that's the number one relationship that we need. Our second relationship is with
of
our
course.
suppliers. So we need to make sure if the supplier is going to deliver you 100,000 boxes, pots, tons, that they have a good enough relationship with you that they were prioritized to make sure you receive your delivery in the right time, because obviously you've got that pinned for production. Our relationship with customers, we try our best, but as I said, it can seem quite faceless, and it feels like being quite small against somebody quite large. They're not interested in what you have to say; they're just interested in what they want to say and when they need it delivered. So it becomes quite a hard juggling game. You can get all the ingredients and build all your relationships and have your whole team. But at the end of the day, you're hoping that these big companies continue with you and pay you on time. And that's another problem. Big companies usually offer 60-day, 90-day payment terms, and that can become a real struggle for smaller companies when you need cash flow. And if you haven't got the cash flow,
Cash flow.
that's when
Yeah.
the businesses stop. And we've seen so many businesses stop the last 6 months because probably
Right.
more down to cash flow than anything else.
Right. Yeah, I know it's difficult, especially with the interest rates shoot up. I mean, it's hard to secure kind of reasonable funding at
Yeah,
reasonable rates, and the cash just gets burned. I've seen 180 days payment terms, which which is
yeah,
absolute an extortion.
yeah,
But it's like, yeah, people say jump, and you have to say how high. And
yeah, yeah,
sometimes, unfortunately, they treat you, they treat you like that. And but business is business.
yeah,
Well. We are, I think we are kind of nearing the end of our podcast, but I think I'd like to finish our conversation kind of on a note about the business, the protein bowl companies. Like, what does it stands for in a sense, kind of not just the USPs, but we talked about earlier. It's a very competitive place.
yeah,
It's very hard to kind of distinguish looking at the bags on the shelf as like which one to buy. So
yeah.
what would make your business stand out? Why and how you are different? And to whoever listens, why would they need to be keen on buying your brand and your products?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, when we started 10 years ago, we wanted to bring a super clean, healthy protein snack to the market because we could see that in the USA, we've been to shows like Natural West on the West Coast and New York Fancy Food on the East Coast, and protein was getting bigger. This was 10 years ago. So we launched our product, and our product is so simple. It's dates and protein powders, nuts and seeds, all kind of rolled together. And we've seen over the last 10 years an explosion of other protein brands, companies like Grenade, companies like Fulfill, Barbells. And what they have done, they've looked at our brand and they've upped the percentage of protein. So they've taken the protein from 10 grams a bag up to like 20 grams a bag. Um, but
Right.
what that's done is that's confused consumers because you think, okay, I'm getting 20 grams, a super hit of protein, and it's got 0 grams of sugar. But what you don't realize is it's got so many baddies in it and sweeteners and emulsifiers and names of products, ingredients that you can't even read. It's
Yeah.
created a lot of confusion. But we, after 10 years, we're about to rebrand a protein ball company. We are completely natural and we still stand by what we started. And the whole reason we started the ethos of the company is to make protein accessible to the many and to offer a clean source protein snack. So
Mm,
that's what we're doing, and we're standing behind. We're not going to add all of the nasties that other companies are using and all of the sweeteners and take away. We use dates, and that forms our sweetness. And dates is such a wonderful ingredient with such
mm,
fantastic macronutrients. And other companies are starting to use all of these sweeteners where they can write no sugar. But we still believe 100% that there is a need for clean protein snacks, and that is the Protein Ball Company, and that's what we're going to continue along the path with.
It's and it's clean and it's natural, because this is one of the other things that, I mean, obviously me on the personal level, I also try to see that need to be natural ingredients, and
Yes,
ideally avoid kind of any sort of pre-processed food and anything that has been kind of broken down to molecule level, that assembled back with emulsifiers and all of that stuff that your body has never gone through hundreds of thousands of years of evolution to metabolize, and then it just sits in your gut or does something that is not particularly healthy. The interestingly though, and that's my thought, how do you manage the shelf life then? Because especially if you don't have anything kind of the stabilizers, anything like that. So
yeah.
how does the shelf life work?
So all of the raw ingredients will have over 12 months shelf life. So if you look
Right.
at a peanut, if you look at a macadamia, an almond, dates, protein powder, pea protein, rice protein, pumpkin protein, they all have sort of around 13, 14, 16 months shelf life. And
Right.
as long as you are turning the ingredients, which we do super quick, then we can have a 12-month shelf life on all of our products.
Okay.
And it's just natural ingredients. If you have natural ingredients and they're kind of sealed in a bag that's airtight, then you can get your longer shelf
Mm.
life as you could just for a bag of peanuts.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect. No, I understand. That's very interesting. So can you just remind me and the listeners as well, what would be the new name of the business?
The name stays the same. We're still the protein ball company.
Yeah.
We are turning into Ballsy by nature. And ballsy by
Right.
nature is because we're going to educate all of our buyers as to the bars and the products that they have on their shelf are not as healthy as what they think they are. And we're going to call out the back of the packs and start to speak with our buyers and saying, do you think this is natural? Do you think this word is healthy? Do you think that this should be given to children and sold? And so we're super excited because we're rebranding with a wonderful company called
Yeah.
Robot Foods, based
Right.
up in Leeds, and we're going to enter the market after 10 years. We're going to start again with a really dynamic, bold, beautiful brand that's completely clean. And we're going to take over the shelves and speak to all the buyers and re-educate them. So it's a wonderful time coming up in our business.
That's very interesting, and it sounds like a very engaging way to talk to the market, and not just differentiate yourself from the way that you talk to them, but in engaging way to actually reposition yourself into a completely separate segment, rather than being me too type competitor with among
Absolutely.
dozens of others. You just completely stand out on your own, and just making people realize that you actually stand for something that is other than just snack bars that are
That's right.
full of.
And what we notice is that we've been pretty timid, and now we're going to start shouting because we've got the
Right.
story, we've got the brand, we've got the look, we've got the experience. So the Protein Ball Company is going to start making it big. Super
Okay.
excited, and it's wonderful to have the opportunity, Michael, with you to tell our story.
Perfect.
Really appreciate it.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, man. It was a wonderful, it was a great conversation. We captured, we've touched on. Obviously, we could have talked for hours, but I'm
Okay.
no Joe Rogan, and nobody's gonna listen for 2 hours of us talking about logistics and snacks. No matter how excited we are, but I think it's a good episode, and I actually look forward to us reconnecting once you've launched, and we can
Absolutely.
actually talk a little bit more about that. Maybe later on in the year. So how it went, what have we learned, what has happened, and we'll
Fantastic.
be keen to kind of continue engagement. So thanks again for coming. It was a pleasure having you on the podcast, and look forward to talking to you in the future.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Michael. Speak again soon.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for tuning into Chain Reaction. We hope you enjoyed the show. Please don't forget to subscribe. If you have a story or opinions to share from your sector, we'd love to hear from you. Simply reach out to Chain Reaction or visit flocks.is for more information. See you next time.